Hello, I am Richard Lowe, and this is the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I'm the writing king and ghostwriting guru, and I'm here with Rhonda Bowen, and we're going to talk about various things. And Rhonda, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, thank you very much for having me in today, Richard. It's great to be able to speak to the people in your audience, find out more about them, and hopefully give them some tips that will be helpful. My name is Rhonda Bowen. I am an American by birth, but have lived in Germany since 1983. And I've had my own business here since 1987. I've done numbers of things in my business over all those years, of course, but the most important thing of what I'm doing now is I work with people I call best professionals, people in business, engineering, science, and technology, all the things I'm not, and help them communicate better across cultures. Across cultures means two things for me, not just one. The one is the one you would normally think about, like people from different countries or living in different countries or different passports or whatever. That's the geographical part. That's one part. But the other part, which for me is even more important, is the organizational part. So
Okay.
why can't engineers talk to salespeople? And why do finance people always get in trouble with people in marketing? Those are also cultural differences, but organizational cultural
Right.
differences. So I work with a combination of those two things. I've worked in person with people from more than 70 countries around the world. I've had my business online since 2019 before the pandemic. So I've been to lots of places, but now I do everything remotely. I have a remote team as well, two people in Africa, one in Asia. And among us, we make sure that we help co-create solutions for companies and organizations who are working on something and just don't have the expertise to be able to be doing that themselves. And so what we try to do is bring in what I call myself, I'm the CWIO, which you've never heard of, which is the Chief Wisdom and Inspiration Officer.
That's
And
a great name. That's a
I,
great name.
I don't call myself, everybody says you're the CEO. I said, no, because I'm not good at executing. So I'm not the Chief Executive Officer. Then I
Right.
have a strategy officer, a CSO. Then I have an operations officer, a COO, and I have a technical officer, a CTO.
Okay.
So the four of us together help with organizations and companies that are working on something and realize that there's something missing. Either they don't have the expertise in-house, they don't know exactly what it is that they need. They would like to go on and do something bigger or better, but they're not quite sure how that works. And as a team, we come in and give them the opportunity to sit down and talk to us and say, okay, how could this work? And recently, just to give you an example, we worked with an organization called World Speech Day. And this organization sponsors speeches and speech giving in over 100 companies every year on the 15th of March. And those people who give speeches, the whole thing needs to be coordinated. And since the pandemic, a lot of this has moved online. Well, they didn't have all the capacity to do things for the websites, to do things for social media, to do things for what they needed to actually be getting out into the world. And so we assisted them with that. And we co-created the solutions that they needed to make sure that their message got out so that on March 15th, everybody could be involved with this. And as I said, people from over 100 companies, 100 countries gave speeches on that day to inspire the world.
That's fascinating. That's an interesting background.
Mm-hmm.
I do a similar thing with my ghostwriting, and that one of the first things I do is find out their audience. So usually who comes to me is, say, a CTO, and he speaks CTO speak, which is usually technical. It might be a VP, might be even a director. And what I do in the book is I translate their language into something that the business will understand. So they talk to me about blockchain and bits and bytes and how blockchain works and stuff like that. And I'm basically, I don't care. What I want to know is, what does it do for the business? Because that's what the leaders care about. I've even been in, when I was at Trader Joe's, I was there for 20 years as their director of computer operations, been in meetings where the CEO said, Richard, I'm sure that's all good. You need to leave now because you're not helping, because you're too technical. He didn't understand a word I was saying. And that taught me something about learning your audience and learning the culture. And definitely don't go to the CTO with your flip charts and things. He doesn't care.
Well, and that's the reason people come to me personally, because I am none of those things. I am not terribly business, technically, scientifically, engineering minded. But when people come and say, but Rhonda, I have to give a talk, or I have to talk to the other people in the C-suite and I'm the tech guy, but nobody understands to pick up on what you're saying. I said, if you can explain it to me, and if you can answer all the questions that I ask you about this, you will be very well prepared then to go to talk to all those other non-techie people like me who are adult and intelligent enough to understand, but need to hear it from you in a way that makes sense to them and not in a way that only makes sense to you and the rest of your technical team.
So can you break that down? Why a leader, somebody who thinks they're a technical leader, like a CIO, CTO, CDO, why do they need to learn how to communicate like that? What's important about that? Why can't they just talk their own language?
Well, I mean, they can, but it depends on who they're trying to reach. It depends on what outcome they're trying to get to. When they're talking to the rest of their team and everybody speaks tech speak, that's great because that's what they all need to be saying because it's their jargon, it's their way of looking at the world, it's their way of finding their outcomes. But as an example, I work with a lot of scientific people and they normally do research and produce products, for the whole world. But one day they came to me and they said, Rhonda, the local community is having a town hall, not a corporate town hall, a real town hall, the way it used to be, way back. And they have asked us to come because they have questions about what we're doing in our company and how it is affecting the environment in the town. And all of a sudden, all of those scientific research people had to go and talk to John and Jane Doe on the street and explain what was going on in the company and how that was affecting what was happening in their neighborhood. There was nobody scientific in the room. But if the company didn't come across well in this, then there were going to be political repercussions from the government. Because people would all go to the mayor or the city council or whoever it was and say, we have to get rid of this company. So there are many times in life that people who are in a very, very good way in their own technical or their own scientific or their own jargon, whatever that is, the minute they have to talk to people who don't understand that, then they really need to switch gears and they really need to think about what do those people need and what is a way to explain it that they will understand.
My doctor could certainly use that training because my doctor is terrible at talking to human beings. Yes. She just comes in with her flip charts and she says, blah, 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 blah. I like, you need to slow down. And she doesn't. And she's, blah, 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 blah. She talks fast too. And so I had to basically take my flip charts and put them in Chat GPT and say, what does this mean? Because she gave, it's funny when you go in for an appointment to your doctor now for a physical and it's 10 minutes long. And it's like very frustrating. Very frustrating. And I've been finding it with I've changed doctors and it's the same thing. They all do it now. Apparently they got to pack the room, but it's talking to your audience, even in a relationship, like a family relationship or even male and female, when you're married, not necessarily male and female, I guess, but when you're married, you have the same thing. You have another person there who may, a man and a woman or somebody from a different background or culture. You've got different communication styles. I know my wife was from Guatemala and I'm from California. And man, we had a communication rift that was interesting. I still have scars.
The interesting thing is, it's the geographical one, but even things like my husband and I've lived in Germany so long, I studied German, I speak perfect German. The language isn't the problem for us. And the culture isn't the problem for us because I've been here for over 40 years. But the interesting thing for us is that I'm an extreme extrovert and he's an introvert.
Yep.
And if I sit down and talk to him and say, what do you think about this? Or I'd like to have your ideas about that or whatever. And we're sitting at the kitchen table and I'm saying these things. The first thing he does is pick up a pen and a piece of paper and start writing things down. And then he says, I'll get back to you. And 3 hours later, I get an email with this much information because he's the introvert. He's had the time to process. He goes through everything the way he sees it, and then he gives it back to me, but not in the moment, which is the way an extrovert would like to have it. So whether it's not always just because everybody who is in your C-suite team, even if each of you has your own specialty in what you're doing as far as your language and your logo and your jargon is concerned, you could still have very different personality styles. You could still have very, very different ways of processing information. And if you're only putting out in the way you do things and not realizing how the people on the other side are processing it, then you can get into the same kind of difficulty. So that's why I said culture is not only, where your passport is.
Well, the wife and I found out that one of the things we had in common was WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. Okay. And we both liked it and we used that as a bridge. And it was funny, we watched all of the pay-per-views and everything. After she passed away, I actually went to the shows myself live, and we could talk about it, and then that let us talk about other things too, because we were night and day. We were opposite sides of the coin,
Yeah.
and finding that bridge was important. And that was one of our bridges that was it wasn't something we would argue about. So it became something we would, you know how it is. So
Mhm.
that's one thing that I found is making bridges that let you communicate with other people. Find something common. People like
Yeah.
men, a lot of men in the United States at least likes football and baseball. Personally, I'm more of I like fencing and wrestling. So you can use football to bridge to a lot of men in the room. Some men, but then you might get down to say some geek level people, and they're more into D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe you use that as a bridge. Having this knowledge about doing your homework and knowing who these people
Exactly.
are, maybe doing a pre-interview with a couple of people and getting their personal life can help you communicate with them and build up that rapport. Is it rapport? Yeah. With them to be able to communicate what in a business setting. Now they know you.
And especially in a business setting, what you need to do is make sure whatever the bridge is, the bridge could also be something about the business. But in the end, in a business, as opposed to in your family life, you're there to produce an outcome. And it's not only for you and the other person you're talking to, it's for the entire company or the entire
Right.
organization. So keeping your eye on the outcome and saying, when we sit down and work on this and we talk about this, it's not only how I like to do it or the way you would like to hear it or how we process it, but what's going to happen in the end? What is this actually going to be a benefit to the people and the rest of the company who are going to be able to take what we've discussed and actually use it to make better profits, save time, whatever it is that you're working on in that particular conversation. But the outcome has to be clear. And there isn't just talking for talking's sake. People have to be able to take things with them and be able to implement those and use them to the better good.
I remember one of the most interesting communication failures that I was involved in. We had a project that was computer development, and we hired a company that was in France. And the French lady who was in charge, a nice lady, she had her own view. Oh, the software went in, and it was so slow. Things that would take, we were converting from an old system. Things that would take a minute on the old system took an hour and a half or 3 hours on the new system. Obviously not acceptable. So we brought it to her attention, and she was like, well, that's just the way it is. She was very laissez-faire about it. It just didn't matter to her. Well, after talking to some other people from Europe and France, there in America, it was here or we were in California, it was very like urgent, 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 urgent to get bread on the shelves. From her point of view, with her French background, there was no urgency. It's just bread. And we never did get through that. We actually wound up firing them, but because they couldn't bridge that gap. They couldn't understand that to us, it was nuclear materials going out there and it was melting down and we needed to get it fixed. To them, it's like, that's only bread, what's the problem? So it's a day late, whoop-de-doo. And we couldn't bridge it. We tried, and my boss I've never seen him turn purple before, and he was purple, which was amusing.
Well, it's the thing I talk about with everybody where I say a lot of people talk about expectations, and the classic terms you hear are somebody sets expectations or somebody meets expectations. For me, what I try to do with my own team and with all the clients that we work is we try to match expectations.
Well, of course, or exceed.
Because that's, well, no, but match meaning at the beginning we sit down and it's not one side saying you must do this and the other side saying yes or no. But what didn't work so well with your French lady was obviously her expectation of what urgency meant and how much something was important to you in the way that it was. Those two expectations didn't meet. And you didn't match.
The infuriating part to my boss was she knew that it was urgent to us. She understood it and she didn't care.
Okay.
Because I don't know if it's cultural or just her. I didn't question her. I was, once she and my boss started arguing, I was like, okay, I'm out of this.
Yeah.
I am not going to get between these two doing a cat fight, or whatever it was. But she just didn't care. And I don't know if she didn't understand or if my boss didn't understand or if there was a personality conflict, who knows? But it's an example of communication failure that you just got to sit down and sometimes, like you say, bridge those gaps. And at the beginning, level setting is a good idea. So for us, probably should have begun. For us, this is very urgent, and we expect this performance level. I don't know if we did that or not. I wasn't part of the initial thing.
Okay.
We expect a service level of A, and if you deliver, a C, then we're going to have words for you, and it's not going to be good, and probably even penalties. The penalties are a great way to bring the service agreement into line. If you don't meet the service level, you're going to have these penalties. You're going to lose this percentage.
See, the expectations are clear
Yeah.
on both sides from the beginning, because
Yeah.
service level agreements are usually in writing, and anybody can go back and then refer to those and say, this is what we agreed on. This is what it says if it works. This is what happens if it doesn't work. So you're definitely in the safe zone there.
Now there's a author and coach named Larry Wingett. He was pretty famous a few years ago. He wrote a book called People Are Idiots and I Can Prove It. It's a great title, I think, and it's a great book. It will very much annoy you if you take offense at that. Because he's like that through the whole book. But he says if you make a promise, you need to keep that promise to your kids. If you say I'm going to ground you for a week, if you don't do this, if they don't do it, you have to ground them for a week, or you teach them you're a liar. And you won't keep. If you have a service level agreement and the vendor doesn't meet it, you have to do the penalties. You cannot make you can make an exception. You talk it over with them and say, okay, this time we're making an exception, but you make it really clear. But you have to make anything you promise or they promise must be fulfilled. Promises are sacred. This is what he says. If you let them slide, you're training them that it's okay.
Yes.
And that's your fault. And I found that with employees. I did it myself. I had employees who were late and I let them slide because, they're only 15 minutes late. And then all my employees started being late. And it's like, how did this happen? And it turned out after doing some self-examination, I let it happen because I let them be late on the very first instance, I should have said, it's not acceptable for you to be late. This is going to cost you. This is what it's going to be. And then enforced it. I bet you the lateness would have stopped. They might not have liked me, but that's not my job as a boss. That's not my job at all. It's not anywhere near my job. Like is not part of a boss's job description. It's sometimes nice to have. Having affinity for a boss is okay, but being friends, no.
Well, respect. I think the word that I would use in that case that was missing was respect. And whether I like somebody or not is totally immaterial. But if I'm working with someone and it's a professional relationship, respect has to be there. And being on time, for me, is one part of showing respect.
I want a boss, if I have a boss again, if I know that the boss is going to carry through. So if the boss makes a promise, the boss is going to keep it. I had one of my first bosses. He says, you work 80 hours a week for this, help us get this company started. I will give you stock. A year later, and he also said, if you bring in a nice big ticket client, I'll give you some stock options, 1% or something. A year later, I came in with $100,000 client, which for this company was huge. And he said, no, you get paid a salary. I'm not going to give you anything. That's exactly the words burned into my brain. Do you think I did anything more for him after that was beyond 40 hours a week? I mean, my production went 40 hours. Thank you very much for letting me know. Promises are very important. And that's part of the communication that you're talking about. Level setting. You made a promise, boss. You will keep it. And if you don't keep it, you're going to have the benefit of the results of not keeping it. And they're not going to be pretty.
That's true.
And it's funny how even 40 years later, I still remember that. I remember that. And then I remember John Shields. He was the CEO of Macy's. And then he came to Trader Joe's and became CEO of Trader Joe's. I'm trying to get some equipment. I'm getting $70,000. And with my old boss, who left before that, it would have been a nightmare. Would have had to do all the research, do all of the financial backing and everything else, and then walk into my office to get shot down a few times. I walked into John Shields' office. I'm all nervous because, he's this big CEO, blah, blah, blah. And he says, you're the tech guy. I'm the finance guy. You understand tech. I don't understand tech. I understand finance, and I'll bet you don't understand finance. So let's stay in our lane. Do you think this is what we need? And I says, yes. Have you done the research? And I says, yes. Good. How much do you need? And I said, $75,000. And he said, approved. My boss before that would never have done that. It absolutely floored me. And it's that respect that you're talking about. It's like, this is your job. And then a few days later, I came in and said, I need an employee. He says, well, tell me about it, and blah, blah, blah. He says, based on what you're saying, I don't get that you have confidence in that decision yet. So go away and do some research and figure it out and come back with that confidence. It took me another few weeks and I came back and said, yeah, I still do. And here's what I need, blah, 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 blah. He said, okay, approved. And even though he disapproved me once, he gave me the backing. He didn't just shoot me down and say, nah, you're being stupid. Like an old boss, you're being stupid. Just go. You know, you don't need a person here. We don't hire people here. He gave me the leeway to do what I needed to do because he understood that. And then to have the lesson of, I tried to take advantage of maybe in his mind the second time. So it was interesting. It was an interesting learning experience. He was the one person in my entire career that I would call better than a C minus average leader. He's the only one. He was probably a A minus, and he's the only one who was a leader of any kind in my entire career. I had one mentor and one leader. They were different people. Steve Davis was my mentor early on, and he was an excellent mentor, but he was very young at that time. And John Shields was the leader. He wasn't a mentor because he was a CEO. He didn't have time for a little director, you know. Anyway,
But I mean, having the time for things, and you've mentioned something very interesting, which now in today's world would be much easier than it was back then when you had to do this, is because we now have AI to help you get all of that research in
yeah,
that you would need to do, and you would in a much faster way be able to find out all the things that you need to go to whoever it is and to make your case, and then to see if that person agrees or disagrees with what you're saying. But the fact that we now have so much better and so much faster access, and often a very much broader and wider experience with AI about all the things that I think when I put a prompt into AI, and I've been working on that a lot recently, and I've been learning from very, very good people about how to do this. But the interesting thing is when you go in, and sometimes your AI, if you have a good relationship with it, also acts to a certain extent like a coach or a mentor, and gives you the answer to whatever you've put in the prompt, but at the end says, but you know, there's also this, or would you like to do something with that? Or this could be complementary to what you have just said, meaning it's helping you by giving you next steps. And many times those are things that I personally haven't even thought of. And
yep,
embracing the wonderful things that are coming into our world now with AI, for me, is such a valuable addition to anybody who's a leader, because you don't have to do these things with a person. With an AI, you can ask it the same question 10 times and just say, I need a different answer, and it will keep doing that, which is very difficult to do with people most of the
oh yeah,
time. There are so many wonderful advantages as a leader of being able to not only work with your people, but also to work with your AI. I listened to an interview 2 days ago where a gentleman said, I have a social media team that has one person, one human person, and 6 AI agents. And we looked at a campaign that we had done. And I said to them, the 6 AI agents, show me all the data, show me the open rates, show me the click-throughs, show me, all the nice things that you would do with social media. And then once they did that, he said, so, and not what or do as telling, but coaching the AI and saying, this is the result we have at the moment. What the result we would like to get is this and this. What things could we do? How could we improve what we have? What new measures maybe do we have to include? And the AI actually produced, through the coaching, the answers to these questions. And he did that totally with 6 AI agents and no people in the room. And it took him about 35 minutes, and he got a brand new campaign out of it.
I've done similar things. Of course, you have to vet it, make sure that it's not lying to you. But you can interrogate AI, and you can use it just like you would. It's a digital assistant. Think of it as a digital assistant that's helping you. Then you've got the right mindset. If you think of it as this person is going to write a book for me, for example, you're thinking of it wrong. Or this person is going to produce a painting for me. It's going to produce a crappy painting or a crappy book or a crappy piece of sculpture. I mean, it'll suffer from what is in robotics is called the uncanny valley, where on the surface it looks really good, but your behind your brain, your subconscious is going something wrong with that. That's the uncanny valley, and it's like in the new Lion King, the remake. The hair is moving the wrong way from the wind, or just a few hairs, or there's shadows in slightly the wrong direction, or there are no shadows, or the limbs are too bouncy. You don't notice this consciously, but you do notice it in your hindbrain. And that's the problem with using AI to do artistic things is, yeah, it turns out you get a crappy sculpture or a crappy painting or crappy book. And if that's what you want, or mediocre is probably a better word. If that's what you want, if you want a mediocre book, that's great. You want a mediocre painting? Sure. You know, you could probably go to your local flea market and pick up something somebody did in China, paint by numbers, and pay $15, and you've got something that's probably better, or at least the same. Anyway, well, we've been talking for about 30 minutes, and I think it's time to wrap it up. How can people find you?
Well, what I'm going to provide for you all is a link to my link tree. And Linktree is a very wonderful thing if you're not using it yet, because you can put in all of the things you would normally think of: name, bio, information, websites, all of those things, but also links to projects that we're working on, links to other things that I'm doing together with my team, as I mentioned at the beginning, with the co-creating the solutions. So I think the easiest way is I'll just provide my Linktree link, and you can open that up and go through it and see which things are appropriate for you.
Awesome. I'll put that in the description. And thank you for coming. This has been the Leaders and Their Stories podcast. I'm Richard Lowe, the Writing King and Ghostwriting Guru. And if you need my services, you can go to thewritingking.com or ghostwriting.guru. And thank you. And this is pretty much a daily podcast. So come again tomorrow, and there'll be some new stuff for you to watch. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.